Hiring a head coach is certainly a crapshoot in the NFL. Like, you look at the Bears. I'll just use the Bears as a good example. Matt Nagy was hired away from the Kansas City Chiefs, where he was on Andy Reid's staff. Comes in 2018, and the Bears that first year under him, they're 12-4. And, Matt Nagy could do no wrong, even though there were warning signs there. Frankly, there were warning signs back to his time in Kansas City. But a few years later, he's shown the door because you realize he wasn't any good. Like, he was in over his head. It's even more of a crapshoot, not just hiring a head coach for an NFL team, when you're hiring somebody with no previous head coaching experience. Like, that's a true crapshoot. They've never done that job before. So it's all about projection and expectation and belief, and you're looking at certain things in an interview, and sometimes people can game an interview. They know how to work it right, but that doesn't mean that their skills are there. It's the greatest crapshoot of all, though, when you're hiring a coordinator that wasn't even a play caller in their current existing previous role. Like, there are certain levels of responsibility, and when you think about hiring a head coach, you typically, now it's changed obviously in recent years, the dynamic a bit, but in general, you would want to hire a coordinator that actually had full autonomy over the play calling and design of the offense or defense, whatever respective area they're in. Like, that leads you to believe that their next step up in career would be as a head coach, where they could become kind of the CEO of the on-field product. When they go from a coordinator in name, but not in actuality because they don't have the play calling and final autonomy, when you're promoting them to hiring them to be a head coach, you feel like you're skipping a step there. And skipping levels with guys, sometimes it works out because they're just talented enough. Could be any number of reasons why they didn't have the play calling responsibility. But it's risky. It's really risky. And usually, it should take 2 to 3 years to be able to start to fully understand what you have in a head coach. It takes time to incorporate a new program, time to get new talent to fit said program. Frankly, you also think about it as usually a team is hiring a new head coach because the team is not very good. So if they were good, you wouldn't be hiring a new head coach. You get what I mean? Like, the expectation generally should be to take some time to be able to fully evaluate a head coach. However, sometimes you can tell pretty quickly that the guy you hired was the wrong guy for the job. And honestly, Nathaniel Hackett for the Denver Broncos was a questionable hire from the beginning. He wasn't even the play caller for the Packers. And when you think about, and I use kind of that Matt Nagy logic of, he wasn't really the full play caller, although Matt Nagy was the second half of 2017. But still, looking at the performances of the Nagy-led offense in 2017 season for the Chiefs, like, we know what happened there in that second half. They fell apart. You look at the past couple of years for the Packers in the playoffs, Hackett wasn't even the play caller, but he was the offensive coordinator, and those offenses underperformed in big spots. Look at last year, the divisional round game against the 49ers, right? So those are the types of things that should be a bit of a red flag. And then you wonder, was he really hired because the Broncos wanted to trade for Aaron Rodgers? And then once the Aaron Rodgers deal didn't go down, they realized they were going to have to pivot elsewhere. Oh my God, what a pivot that was. And they were kind of stuck with Nathaniel Hackett. Like, maybe that's not true, but it certainly feels like that's a possibility. And then you wonder, like, once Nathaniel Hackett didn't get Aaron Rodgers to come in, was he doomed to failure? Maybe he was. But there should be no doubt here. Nathaniel Hackett needed to be fired. And it's rare to say, like, a head coach doesn't even last through his first season. You know, you'll get, like, the Urban Meyer, like, understandable why the Jaguars moved on from him last year and didn't even let him finish out the season. You know, you go back to Bobby Petrino. He left Atlanta before his first season there ended, mercifully, thankfully, for the Falcons organization. But, you know, I think of, like, Lou Holtz in the mid-'70s for the Jets. He didn't last the first season. Or somebody else I'm forgetting, but it doesn't happen very often. Usually a new head coach at least gets a full first season. But, yeah, Nathaniel Hackett was that bad. There was no reason to delay the inevitable. He was dead man walking in terms of being the head coach of the Broncos. There's no way he was coming back for season 2. So if you've already made that decision, why tease it? Just fucking do it and get it over with. And I know you see some guys on Ben Albright and others Yeah, I know he was talking about, well, it doesn't make sense for the Broncos to do it. Respectfully, that's dumb. Yes, it fucking did. You already knew you were going to be out on him. Why delay the inevitable? Why not send a message now? You could say, well, the preparation in the offseason, like getting a head start on the head coaching search, like maybe that's a bit overrated. No, it really isn't. Again, why wait? Get out there early, make a stand, make a statement now. But the bottom line is, Hackett sucked. The big trade for Russell Wilson happened, and he totally sucked this year. That's not entirely on Nathaniel Hackett. Like, a big piece of that is Russell Wilson just was trash this year. But Nathaniel Hackett was the guy in charge of the offense, and he was a head coach that also wanted to be the offensive coordinator until he delegated that responsibility. That offense sucked. They sucked hard. 24th in total yards per game, 32nd in points scored. I joke about Bears football, but the Broncos were playing Bears football. They're butt naked last in the league in point scoring. They just made the acquisition of Russell Wilson. That's not supposed to fucking happen. All of this with an offensive-minded head coach. And you think about in 6 of their losses for the Broncos, if they had just scored 20 points, they'd be 10-5 right now. They'd be a playoff team. Like, that's horrendous. They wasted an elite defense. 5th in yards allowed. 7th in points allowed. Like, when you think about, in theory, you say, hey, you're going to trade for a 9-time Pro Bowl franchise quarterback and pair him with an elite defense, you would think at minimum a wild card berth would not be an unreasonable expectation. And you couldn't even get close to that. You could see from the very outset of the 2022 season that frickin' Hackett's game management was terrible. Remember that week 1 effort against the Seahawks? Instead of letting Russell Wilson have the ball in his hands on 4th and 4 or 5, and maybe there's a reason for that, he'd rather sit there and have Matt Prater attempt a 64-yard fucking field goal. It was so bad in terms of his game management and situation and clock management that they had to hire Jerry Rosburg to help with that. When you're doing that, you know you done fucked up. And then you ultimately lose the locker room. That performance on the Nickelodeon game on Christmas Day, that was enough. Like, you're getting clowned by Patrick, a frickin' SpongeBob SquarePants cartoon character. Like, you've got players going at it on the sidelines. There's no accountability. There's no responsibility. There's no control. There's no discipline. Like, it's just a fucking mess. He had to go. And there was no reason to let him coach 2 more games. You already made your decision. The best thing, honestly, for Nathaniel Hackett at this point, too, if you think about it, was give him a couple of weeks extra paid vacation and let him focus on the next step of his journey. No reason to let him get lost in the schmoz. Give him a little bit of an opportunity to leverage whatever network he has and maybe line himself up a job for 2023. It's a win-win-win for every fucking buddy, so they just needed to do it, and they did. And now the conversation for the Broncos is going to shift to who's going to be the next head coach. You're going to hear about Dan Quinn and the connections there. Maybe you bring in along a Brian Schottenheimer, or it's going to be a Sean Payton, that kind of pipe dream for Broncos fans. And in my opinion, these are the wrong fucking conversations to have. Nathaniel Hackett was a ding-dong dumb dick hire. He sucked. And he deserved to be fired. So why is George Paton still general manager of the Denver Broncos? George is the one that hired Nathaniel Hackett. A hire that was so bad, he didn't even finish his first season. And even when you think about Urban Meyer got fired as much as anything for the embarrassment he brought to the Jaguars in terms of off the field and other shit. It wasn't just on-field performance that got him canned. Bobby Petrino, using that example, he quit on the Falcons and went to take the job at Arkansas. So you're going back to the 1970s of having a guy being hired and getting fired within his first season. That's how historically terrible this hire was. And it was Patton, the general manager, that made this hire. So if that hire was that bad, why in the bluest of blue fucks would you trust that said general manager to make another head coaching hire? That's ridiculous. Furthermore, Hackett's a fall guy here, in over his head, incompetent fall guy here, but a fall guy nonetheless. Because last time I checked, it wasn't Nathaniel Hackett that made the dumpster fire trade for Russell Wilson. That was the Broncos general manager, George Paton. He's the one that gave up first, second, and fifth round picks in 2022. First and second round picks in 2023. Former first round pick Noah Fant to bring Russell Wilson into the goddamn fold. Never bothering to ask, apparently, like, hey, the rarest thing you can have in the NFL is a franchise quarterback, so why the fuck would the Seahawks, who have had Russell Wilson for the decade, who's been a 9-time Pro Bowler there, want to trade the freaking franchise quarterback who's in still his early 30s, as opposed to getting rid of their 70-plus-year-old head coach? Apparently didn't want to fucking answer that question, never bothered to ask why that was. And then, unprovoked, with no real reason or motivation to have to do it other than just being a dumb dick, George Paton makes a big statement and gives Russell Wilson that massive contract extension. 5 years, $242+ million. That doesn't even fully enact until 2024. Like, that move has been so disastrous, you've got people entertaining whether or not the Broncos should cut ties with him after June 1st, 2023. Because releasing him then means that the Broncos' dead cap in 2023 would only be $39 million. In 2024, it would be $68 million. And goddamn, based off of Russell Wilson's performances this year, it's best, it looks like, to consider it a sunk cost and move the fuck on. Like, that's how bad. The two most important decisions that George Paton could make as a general manager: he hired Nathaniel Hackett and traded big for Russell Wilson, and those have both been unmitigated fucking disasters. You have a new ownership group now with the Denver Broncos. Why in the hell would they still be tied to George Paton? Why the hell would you want him involved in the next head coaching search? Am I missing something here? That's not to say that Nathaniel Hackett didn't deserve to be shown the door. He clearly did. We all know this. But what about the guy who fucking hired him? What about the guy who traded for the quarterback that looks like one of the worst trades in NFL history? If you're going to fire the coach, you should have fired the general manager. It should have been a total house cleaning. And the fact that it hasn't been at this point, I think, is a crock of shit by the Denver Broncos.